You keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
So mind bombing. Could you please explain a little bit what that was at the moment?
The concept of mind bombing. Bob Hunter, who was the first president of Greenpeace, actually was responsible for that, and it's what you would call going viral today. But when we looked at sending messages through the mainstream media back then, like 50 years ago, that's what he referred to it as, dropping mind bombs into the public mind. Not many people are aware of how Greenpeace began, but in late 1969, there was a demonstration on the border between Canada and the United States to oppose nuclear testing in Amchitka Island in the Alaskan Aleutians. And we all got together from that demonstration. There were two main groups, the Sierra Club and the Quakers. So the Sierra Club was the green and the Quakers were the peace, really. But how that name came about was that at one of the early meetings, we had a group called the Don't Make a Wave Committee. It wasn't Greenpeace, it was called the Don't Make a Wave Committee. And the reason for that name was that people still remember the tsunami from the Anchorage earthquake in 1963 that hit Vancouver Island in Hawaii. So we called it the Don't Make a Wave Committee. And the Quakers had sent a sailing boat down to Bikini Atoll in 1956 to protest atmospheric testing by the US. So the idea, let's send a boat up to the Aleutians to protest the bomb. And at one of the early meetings, somebody left and flashed a peace sign and said, peace, and Bill Darnell said, make it a Greenpeace, and that became the name of the boat. Bob Hunter said, great name for the boat. And so the boat came before the organization. So in '72, then we officially changed the name to the Greenpeace Foundation. Greenpeace today denies that I was a co-founder, but my lifetime membership number is 007, which means I'm the 8th member because Bob Hunter's membership number was 000. So I don't really bothers me, but it's just strange that all these people who weren't born at the time deny that I was one of the co-founders. But reality is reality, and they can't deny history.
We are not.
Pulled it out of his hand and threw it into the water and picked up the seal and took it to safety. Well, I was brought before the Greenpeace Board of Directors and said that they accused me of theft and vandalism. You stole the man's property, you destroyed his property. I said, yeah, but I was there to save the life of a seal. If I had to do it again, I would do it. I didn't hurt anybody. And said, well, we can't condone theft and vandalism. So they voted me off the board of Greenpeace for that. And I said, well, that's fine. I then set up Sea Shepherd with the concept of aggressive nonviolence. What that means is that it's okay to aggressively intervene if you don't hurt anybody. And over the last 50 years, I've never caused a single injury to anybody, and I've never been convicted of a felony crime. So aggressive nonviolence means to directly intervene, to harass, to blockade, whatever. I guess the best definition of it, if a poacher is about to shoot an elephant and you knock the rifle out of his hand and you destroy the rifle, you saved the elephant's life, but you didn't injure the poacher. So that's a perfect example of aggressive nonviolence. But unfortunately, we live in a society where property has more value than life. And so because of that, it's condemned as terrorism. Martin Luther King once said, you cannot commit an act of violence against a non-sentient object. And we've never done that. But in our society, again, property is more valuable. I mean, just think for a moment, walk into the city of Mecca and spit on the black stone. Do you think you're going to get out of that city alive? No. Walk into Jerusalem and attack the Wailing Wall with a pickaxe. You're going to get shot by an Israeli soldier. Nobody's going to have any sympathy for you. We're going to Rome and attack the Pieta with a hammer. We're going to be in a lot of trouble. But every day we go into the most sacred, most beautiful cathedrals of the natural world, the rainforests of Amazonia, the Great Barrier Reef off of Australia, and totally desecrate and destroy these beautiful, mysterious cathedrals. And how do we respond? Picket signs, letters to governor, whatever. But nobody actually stands up and fights for it because they're not as sacred to us as a hunk of marble in Rome or an old meteorite in Mecca or an old wall in Jerusalem. Those are all anthropocentric concepts. We've made them sacred because it involves us. And we think that we are the most important species on the planet, the only species on the planet. It was all created for us. And we have to move away from that idea and understand that we don't live here alone. We live here because all of these other species, millions of other species, allow us to live here. We don't live in a world without bees and microbes and worms and fishes and trees and whales. We simply don't. And unless we learn to understand that, we're simply not going to survive.
Yes, sir.
When I was a national director of the Sierra Club in the United States one time, and they brought us to this meeting to basically lecture us directors on what our priorities should be, saying that instead of doing what we were doing, we should direct our energies to helping people in the inner city or protecting, poor people and such, and addressing social issues. And that really annoyed me because I said to them, 99 cents of every charitable dollar goes to people. Keep your damn greedy hands off of our penny. We need it to protect the forests and endangered species and everything. And I remember somebody calling, "You're a racist." I said, "Don't call me a racist. I just like everybody equally. I don't discriminate." And that's my attitude on that. Human beings are the problem. I don't care what race they are. And I don't care what their culture is or what their religion are. We are the problem as long as we continue to believe that we are better than every other species on this planet.
And you're actually writing a book on it, right?
Yeah, I'm writing a book called Biocentrism, which is an understanding that we have to replace our anthropocentric point of view with a biocentric point of view. We have to understand that every single dominant religion on this planet is anthropocentric. It believes that it was created for us. It believes that we are the most important species. I always look on us as a bunch of overly conceited naked apes that become divine legends in our own mind. We really believe that. And it's just simply not true. We don't live without these other species, and we have to accept that. And right now, we're going to lose more species of plants and animals between 2000 and 2065 than we've lost in the last 65 million years. That rate of extinction is unprecedented. We are responsible for it, and every species that we lose impoverishes the planet more and more. I like to compare the planet to a spaceship. We're on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy, and every spaceship has a life support system that gives us everything we need. The food we eat regulates climate and temperature and produces oxygen so we can breathe. And that life support system is run by a crew of engineers. Those engineers keep everything running. We're not engineers, we're passengers, we're having a wonderful time amusing ourselves. But what we are doing is we're murdering the engineers, we're killing them off. And there's only so many engineers you can kill before that machinery begins to fall apart. And that's where we're heading if we don't do something about it. I got a call from a reporter from Fox News a few years ago, and he said, "Did you say that trees, bees, whales, and worms are more important than people?" I said, "Yeah, I said that." He said, "How can you say something so outrageous, so unchristian?" I said, "Well, because bees, trees, whales, and worms are more important than people. It's simple as that. Because they can live here without us, but we can't live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. That makes them ecologically far more important than we are." Technology. We don't understand non-manipulative intelligences, those species that don't need to drive a car or use a telephone. I mean, whales can communicate with each other over hundreds of miles underwater. They don't need a telephone. But I was doing a debate with a Norwegian whaler one time, and he says, "But Watson, you say that whales are more intelligent than people. This is a really stupid thing to say. How can you be so stupid?" And I said, "Well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with the natural world. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than we are." And he said, "Well, yes, but by that criteria, cockroaches are more intelligent than we are." George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you. Every species has intelligence relative to their ability to live within the ecosystem they're living in. But then just take a look at cetaceans, for example. The mammals have, for the most part, from mice to people, have 3-lobe brains. Cetaceans, dolphins and whales, have 4-lobe brains. And that 4th lobe is almost all associated with associative behavior. And the convolutions on the neocortex area of whales and dolphins are far more complex and pronounced than ours. The average size of a human brain is 1,300 cubic centimeters. The average size of an orca brain is 6,000 cubic centimeters. The average size of a sperm whale brain is 9,000 cubic centimeters. The greatest, most evolved brain on the planet. But just because we don't understand it, we can't assume that they're not intelligent. And I believe that we will one day learn how to speak to whales. They're actually making some inroads on this right now. But, they had a conversation last year, a short one, with a humpback whale in the Bering Sea, because using computers and that, we can actually get into that. We have to learn to speak on the level that they speak, which is far, far higher and more complex than anything that we can speak in. But also, we know, like, for instance, orcas. An orca in Iceland speaks a different language than an orca in British Columbia, or speaks a different language than an orca in Antarctica. And so that's when you put an orca from Iceland into a dolphinarium with one from British Columbia, it causes all sorts of problems, because it's like putting a French person into a room with somebody from Russia. I mean, they just, they can't communicate. We don't seem to even really understand that all these different species have their own ability to communicate with each other. And so we really have a lot to learn. We just make a lot of assumptions. We're now finding actually that trees communicate. They use a fungal system to communicate messages through that system, so that if a tree gets sort of a disease attacks a tree on this edge of the forest, trees on the other end of the forest start producing antibodies to deal with that disease because it's been communicated to them. There's so much about the natural world we don't understand. And one of the reasons we don't understand is we've restricted our ability to understand that through anthropocentric educational systems, where we learn to all sorts of useless nonsense, which has nothing to do with our life on this planet.
I've seen you cry for one whale, and maybe many, but I've seen you in video crying for one whale being killed. You've risked your life, but more than anything, you've seen so much human violence against fauna, seals being clubbed, whales being butchered. First of all, how do you cope with that after these 50 years of struggle and fight? And do you have any idea of how we can heal as humanity?
Well, I cope with it because in a confrontation situation, you have to be sort of detached, like a surgeon is detached from the patient. And so you can't allow yourself to become emotional in those situations. So, because you have to make decisions, and life and death decisions, so you have to make sure you're making that objectively. But how you cope with it is through action, by actually doing things, by getting involved in that. And also, as I've said many times, to not worry about the future. Don't get depressed, don't get pessimistic, because all our power lies in the present, and what you do in the present will define the future. So we can't worry too much about what the future will be, because we have to focus on defining what that future will be. So that's one of the most important advices I think to give to young people is don't get pessimistic, don't get depressed, because you have the power to change the world. In fact, the only thing that's ever changed the world is the imagination and the courage of individuals. I always point out that it was because of Diane Fossey we still have mountain gorillas in Rwanda. One woman made that difference. Because of a man named David Wingate, the Bermuda storm petrel, this particular bird, did not go extinct. One person made a difference. And that's happening all over the world, with thousands and thousands of people making a difference by addressing thousands and thousands of issues. You're not going to save the planet through the government. You're not going to save the planet, well, first of all, you can't save the planet because it's not going to go anywhere. You just have to save everything on it for now. But you have to be able to, focus on something that you're passionate about. And your approach really depends upon diversity. The strength of an ecosystem is in diversity. The strength of a movement is in diversity. So that can be education, it can be litigation, it can be legislation, it can be activism. There's all sorts of different approaches. And that approach is really defined by what your talents, your abilities, and your passion are. And just focus on that one thing, you can change the world. They made a movie about the a documentary about the formation of Greenpeace, and the title of it was How to Change the World. And it focused on those early days and how we were so naive that we actually thought we could go out and change the world, that we could stop Soviet whaling, that we could stop a bomb. And we did. But at the time, people thought we were crazy for even trying to or attempting to do it. So again, don't let anybody deter you from your passion. You can do it if you go out there, because the answer to an impossible problem is very simple. You find the impossible solution. And how do you find that impossible solution? Through passion, courage, and imagination. 1972, the very idea that Nelson Mandela would be president of South Africa was unthinkable, impossible, and yet the impossible became possible. So there's many examples of that. But I certainly am critical of religion, because all these religions are anthropocentric. That is, they're all delusional. I call it a collective form of mass psychosis. We don't even think about why we believe in the things that we think that we believe in. And we really have to look at this, where do we fit into this world? And we fit in with all these other species, and we have to live in harmony with all those other species, and that is actually the definition of biocentrism.
But then you don't practice anything like meditation or prayer or walking in nature to recharge from all what you do.
Well, the best form of meditation is swimming, hiking, climbing, getting involved, activism. That's the best form of meditation. The best form of meditation is to not think about meditation.
That should be a great lesson. And concerning the impact that you say politics do not have, you once ran for mayor, so you once believed in it, maybe.
No.
Are you still at that stage? Okay, so you ran for mayor without believing in politics, but then tell us about your belief in politics or non-belief in it.
Well, I ran for member of parliament in Canada twice. I ran for mayor of Vancouver once. Ran for the Parks Board once. I didn't run to win. I ran because it gave me a forum. They had to give me the stage to address the people. So it's an excellent forum. If you want to run for office, you get to speak to everybody. My big problem with running for mayor of Vancouver, I was actually afraid at one point I was going to win. And that was the last thing that I wanted. But the other three candidates were just making such fools of themselves. I said, I could win this thing. And all I could imagine was being behind that desk for 2 years and not being able to do much. So, but fortunately I lost. But to me, that was the reason I did it, was just for the opportunity to communicate.
Okay, but then I think as humans, we are also good sometimes. And as politicians, I believe not all of them must be bad politicians. So I want to ask you, do you currently have some political allies in power? Who do you consider your allies are?
Well, my own state senator is Bernie Sanders, and so he's very much involved and doing things, and he's a very decent human being. But here's the problem: a lot of people who are involved in politics mean well. They have, they really want to do good, but they find themselves in a system where they can't do anything, and because you're powerless within that system, because it's all corporate control, the corporate control of media, corporate control of government. Politics is always called the art of the possible, and what that means is you do what is possible to do, and to do actually think anything courageous in politics is almost political suicide, because you're going to lose the election again. We had a prime minister in Canada in the early 80s, Joe Clark, and he made the decision to actually make sure that the price of a gallon or a liter of gasoline would be reflected by the real cost of doing it. 6 months later, he was no longer prime minister. So if you come down with a real solution to address these problems, you're probably going to be out of office really quick, because there's too many vested interests. The United States is a good example. The United States is the best government in the world that money can buy. And Mark Twain, many years ago, called it the Parliament of Whores. He knew exactly what it was all about. Nothing gets achieved through that. It's all bought and sold.
So yes, we cannot all go and put our bodies between the harpoon and the whale. Maybe we should. But I'm sure you give your children and people you love some good advice to actually do something.
I don't tell my children how to live their life. I tell them that it's their life. Follow what your instincts, your intuition, follow it. And I tell this to children all the time. When people say, "What do we teach our children?" Nothing. Encourage their intuition. They have an intuitive understanding of the nature of the world. Our whole educational system is to get that out of them so they can regurgitate all this useless information. When I was very young, there's two things that I did which taught me a lesson. One, I cut up the map of the world and I put it all together, and I said to the teacher, I think this is all one continent together. I think it all just broke up. And the teacher looked at me, well, that's a really stupid idea. In 1950s, yeah, it was a stupid idea. But I said, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. But so the teacher was wrong and I was right. Not because I was smarter, but because it just intuitively made sense. The other thing I said was, I think these dinosaurs, I think they were birds. I think they actually had feathers. oh, that's a stupid idea. Turns out that I was right. Why? Because it just made sense. So that's why I think we really should listen to children and their observations of nature and the world, because they see things that we don't see anymore, that has been conditioned out of us. They send us to schools to teach us not to be whatever we were born to be, but to teach us to be what they want us to be.
I hear that, and let's say we're not children anymore. We have been formatted in some way. People here are usually already engaged in something if they came to see you, I believe and I hope. What kind of actions, of concrete actions, you would love people to do? You would love people and you would love to see them doing or us doing?
I just would like to see people to do whatever they're passionate about, to follow that. Not for me to tell people what to do.
You insist.
Not to do. But also never lose touch with your childhood. Canadian writer Farley Mowat was once commented about me. He said, the problem with Watson is he's never grown up, and I hope he never does. And we've got to keep in touch with that childhood intuition.
When we prepared this interview, the conclusion a little bit that I had is also that we should be closer. I mean, as we are here at the Water Odyssey, there are many sea lovers. I wanna just take you and ask you just a question about your moments in life at sea. So, do you have any memory of your moments with the crew that have marked you in your story as a navigator? So what's your favorite moment at sea, or when you think about good moments at sea, what comes to you?
Well, I've had over 6,000 volunteers over the years who crewed on the ships, and the thing that, what I really am happy about is so many of them have gone on to do really good things on their own. One of my crew, she went on to she wanted to rescue refugees in the Mediterranean, so she got Banksy to get her a ship, and she's out there doing that right now. Back in 1979, when I went after the pirate whaler, the Sierra, and rammed it, put it out of business, I had an 18-year-old crew member who said to me, "Oh, we got to do something about the way they treat chimpanzees and animals in laboratories." I said, "Yeah, well, Alex, this is Sea Shepherd. We're not going to be going into any laboratories." And he said, "Oh, I got to do something." I said, "Well, why don't you do something about it?" He said, "Well, what can I do?" I said, "I don't know, use your imagination. Come on." And so what he did is he went back to Maryland in the U.S. and he got a job in the laboratory. And he spent a whole year documenting everything that went into that laboratory. Then he went to the Washington Post and television stations and exposed them and shut it down. And then he started his own organization, which is the People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. So that was started by an 18-year-old guy who said, "Well, what can I do?" And so there's many examples of that, of people who have been involved. And I think that the greatest gift, if I'm giving anybody anything, is the empowerment, the idea that they can make a difference. And I don't have to tell them what to do. They have to come up with that idea and go with it. And on so many different levels that they can do it. So there's people right now around the world who are doing a lot of amazing things who used to be on my crew. And for that, that's the most, probably the most, that gives me the most satisfaction overall.
That's a great one. And one last question, because we're running out of time, sadly. Do you plan to keep the work of disrupting the whaler's fleet?
Well, that's the most effective way to deal with it. Working that within the context of the media, I've always said that the most powerful weapon on the planet is the camera. So we make sure we document everything that we do. One of the things that probably had most impact on the Japanese whalers was when I decided we're going to do our own TV show called Whale Wars, which ran for 8 seasons on Animal Planet and Discovery. And that reached millions and millions of people. That was the thing that really humiliated and embarrassed Japan. That's why Japan wants their retribution against me. Not for ramming their vessels or doing anything. It's because of that television show. So that was the most powerful weapon that we deployed to get some. So it's really important that whatever you do, anything, that you dramatize it, that you make a story out of it. And that means a good understanding of our media culture and how media works, because we do live in a media culture. You know, when people say, "Oh, you're just a media manipulator," yeah, of course I am. Just like Coca-Cola, or if you're running for president, you got to manipulate the media if you're going to get anything done. And how do you manipulate the media? By giving the media what the media cannot resist. Because there's only 4 elements to a story. Any news story you see every day, there's only 4 elements: sex, scandal, violence, or celebrity. Every story has one of those elements or more. And if you have all 4 elements, you got yourself a super story. Like, for instance, I led a campaign to protect wolves in northern British Columbia, the Yukon. And so we had the violence of them shooting wolves from helicopters. We had the violence of them threatening to shoot us if we were to interfere. So we had that down pretty good. And then we had the scandal of an environment minister taking a bribe from a big game hunting organization. Great, now we got violence and scandal. So I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson. And at the press conference, place was packed, just like this. And a reporter for the Vancouver Sun says, "What does Bo Derek know about wolves? I mean, this is really stupid having her as your spokesperson." I said, "Well, if I had the best wolf biologist in the world, Gordon Haber or David Beck, it'd be an empty room, wouldn't it? Nobody'd be interested." But because she is our spokesperson, this is going to be the front page story of your newspaper tomorrow. You're going to write it. The editor's going to put it there. It's going to be a headline, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it, is there? And that's exactly where that story was the next day. They cannot resist that. I learned that in 1977. I took Bridget Bardot out to the ice floes off Labrador. I posed her cheek to cheek with a baby seal. Bang! Every magazine cover in the world because of that one thing. That's the nature of our media, and you just have to be able to use it.
Thank you very much for sharing all of this. Thank you. We're very happy to welcome Miriam Serfas, who will be playing Water Spirits by Kim Robertson with her own arrangement in the house, along with Paul.
Dihydrogen monoxide is a substance relatively rare, the liquid of life and beauty fair, a living elephant that defies the rules without a care, the one single thing that all life must share. Water is the blood of the earth. Without it, the planet would have little worth. We leave our first ocean at the moment of our birth into 3 oceans of darkness, rain, and surf. One ocean lies beneath our feet, beneath the sand. The second ocean surrounds the verdant land. The third ocean is above our head. From dark clouds the tears of life are shed. Molecules intricately interlaced and connected, earth, sea, and sky hydromatically protected. Where does one end and the other begin? We swim through it all with feet, feathers, and fin. Water is the immortal potion. It pours from the sky into the ocean, runs off the earth into river and lake. Without it, the land would wither, shrivel, and bake. Rivers are the arteries of the land. Streams are the capillaries in nature's plan. The sun is the heart that has pumped for ages, circulating the blood through numerous stages, delivering nutrients to the soil and trees, draining waste to prevent disease, feeding and cleaning the living land, estuaries of the liver in nature's plan. Circulation from ice to liquid to steam, ecosystems arranged in a life support scheme. The planetary body kept well and fed. Without the water, the planet would be dead. The glass of water that you drink could have once been pissed by a dinosaur, I think, for water is ageless and constantly changing form, an element that behaves far from the norm. Sometimes it even forgets to freeze. Ice crystals constantly within it tease, heavier as liquid than as ice. Without that fact, nature would not be so nice. If ice were heavier than water, the seas would have long expired, and life on Earth long since retired. The sun has superheated oceans of steam, a Dantean sauna through which fire screams.